18th, 2003, the day before Ann Wright resigned, President Bush, as required by Congress in its resolution authorizing the use of force, sent Congress a formal statement of why a war on Iraq was immediately necessary. He sent a 1-page letter and a 9-page report. The letter used the language that Congress had provided and asserted that Iraq posed a threat and constituted a terrorist organization. The report said that Iraq was harboring and aiding terrorists and terrorist organizations that threatened the U.S., and that a war on Iraq was a vital part of a war on terrorism. It said that Iraq possessed chemical and biological weapons, and that it was developing nuclear weapons, and that Iraq was a threat to the U.S. because of its long-range missiles and its unmanned aerial vehicles, and because it could share weapons of mass destruction with terrorist groups that it was supposedly harboring, including Al-Qaeda. These and other statements in that report and in other communications to Congress and to the public through the media were intentional lies, and it is a felony to lie to Congress. Taking a nation to war on the basis of lies is not just a high crime, it is the highest crime possible. When we spoke yesterday in Los Angeles, there was a young man, a soldier who'd fought in Iraq, who spoke with us and got up and talked about what had been done to him and what post-traumatic stress disorder was like and what it felt like to be completely discarded by the United States military when they were done with him, and he broke into tears. And 30% of the troops coming back have serious mental problems. There was a woman who spoke as well, who, like Cindy Sheehan, lost her son in this war. And we went out to the beach in Santa Monica and we looked at the crosses representing every single U.S. soldier who has died in Iraq. And there was a little sign in the corner that said, if we were to display the Iraqis killed, it would fill the entire beach. So this is the kind of impact we're talking about. This is why this is the highest crime possible. So if this is not an instance to start talking about impeachment, there never can be one. On July 20th, 2002, the CIA and MI6, that's the secret intelligence of this country and of the United Kingdom, had an all-day meeting across the river at CIA headquarters. And Sir Richard Dearlove had a 90-minute private meeting with George Tenet, the head of the CIA. Dearlove is the head of MI6. 3 days later in London, Dearlove reported on his CIA meeting at number 10 Downing Street, the office and residence of Prime Minister Tony Blair. This was a meeting with Tony Blair and with his Foreign Secretary, his Defense Secretary, his Attorney General, the Chairman of Joint Intelligence Committee, the Chief of Defense Staff, a Foreign Policy Advisor, and a Foreign Policy Aide who took the minutes, which came to be called the Downing Street Minutes or the Downing Street Memo. And this memo, together with 7 related leaked documents, makes crystal clear that Bush and Cheney had decided to go to war long before admitting it to Congress or the American people. That Bush and Cheney had decided to lie about weapons of mass destruction and ties to terrorism. That the Brits were concerned about the illegality of an aggressive war, but the Bush administration really was not. That going to the UN was an attempt to legalize a war that had been decided upon long before, and not in any sense an attempt to avoid a war. The hope was of getting Saddam Hussein to reject an ultimatum on inspections. The language used in the memos was to wrong foot Saddam, and it was made very, very clear that this was the goal. It didn't work. He accepted the terms, but, we got a war anyway. The focus... The other thing that's made clear in these documents is that the focus of the Bush and Blair administrations was entirely on persuading the public and not at all on what it was telling the public they were up to, that is trying to avoid a war. And it's made very clear that the Bush administration and the Blair administration were aware that Iraq was not a threat, even to its neighbors. The Downing Street documents are backed up by numerous U.S. sources. We haven't had the kind of leaks we need, as Ann rightly keeps pushing for, but we've had quite a few. We know from independent reporting that Bush wanted a war with Iraq for regime change before he took office. We know from Treasury Secretary Paul O'Neill that Bush was planning a war for regime change in January '01. We know that in March '02, Bush was reported as saying, F blank 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 Saddam, we're taking him out. We know from Secretary of War Donald Rumsfeld that he was planning an attack just hours after the airplanes hit on September 11th. We know from Richard Clarke that Bush told him on September 12th to find reasons to attack Iraq. We know from Senator Trent Lott that the Bush administration was focused on regime change in Iraq shortly after 9/11. On September 20th, Undersecretary of Defense Doug Faith wrote a memo advocating attacking Iraq, which he referred to as, quote, deliberately selecting a non-Al-Qaeda target. So the White House Iraq group was formed to market this war to us, the American people, to leak phony evidence to the New York Times, and to hit all the talk shows the same morning to talk about what had shown up in the New York Times, which it was then possible to talk about. These were leaks of classified information, although you don't hear any protests from the White House about these leaks, about the aluminum tubes and so forth. There doesn't seem to be an issue there. The White House pressured intelligence officials, and Ray McGovern, who's sitting in the back of the room, can tell you about this story, but the White House pressured intelligence officials to get with the program and punished those who told the truth. And Colin Powell went to the United Nations and rattled off a string of lies that his own staff at the State Department had told him would not even be plausible. This was a show for U.S. media outlets, not for the United Nations. So the evidence is extensive that each claim for each specific weapons program and for the ties to 11 was known at the time to be a lie. And a majority of the American public in polls say that they know that Bush lied. A majority also say, and this is not well enough known, that they favor impeachment for those lies. And a majority in Pennsylvania, which is the only state where this has been asked, favor voting for congressional candidates who want impeachment.